The famous Enlightenment writer Voltaire once said of the Crusades, they were a wasteless and pointless effort. They were concocted by popes who wanted to gain material wealth for themselves and managed to influence superstitious and stupid crusaders. This is the idea of why the Crusades exist, and it's entered into the modern imagination too. More recently, as we see a rise in Islamic terrorism, many people believe that perhaps the Crusades are the reason why so many people are against the West, why such acts of violence are perpetrated as a kind of revenge or payback for the Crusades themselves. Many people think that the Crusades, therefore, were all about entering into Muslim lands. These peaceful people who were very cultured were overwhelmed by superior armies who sought to slaughter them and take as much as they could in order to enrich themselves. Recent scholarship, though, goes against this idea, and many scholars are able to say that this is just a legend, a myth. And yet, in popular culture, people still believe it, especially when they look at reports in the media, which too often is concerned with sensationalism rather than the facts. So what I'm trying to say is that a lot of this information seems to be limited to academic circles only. But the Crusades themselves were never meant to be unleashed as a slaughter of all Muslims. They were never meant to be launched so that people would enrich themselves. Rather, they were not offensive but defensive wars that were meant to protect indigenous Christians in the area and pilgrims in that holy land. First of all, the Crusades are complicated. They took place over the course of half a millennium in places like Spain and southern France, and of course in North Africa and the Holy Land. For the sake of brevity, I can't look at every one of these Crusades. I'll choose one, the First Crusade, the most famous one, which took place in the Holy Land. First of all, a little bit of background. The warrior prophet Muhammad was able to lead many of his followers, and they decided to bring those who were not Muslim into the house of Islam. And in order to do so, they used military force to do that. They eventually conquered places like Syria and Persia, and in the year 638, they even managed to conquer Jerusalem. By 700, they had conquered Morocco, Egypt, all of North Africa, and they were only stopped in the middle of the 8th century by Charles Martel at the Battle of Poitiers in France. Up until then, and for the next 200 years or so, many Christian areas of the Mediterranean were actually being overwhelmed by Muslim pirates and experienced pillage and plunder. This context is very important to understand the Crusades themselves, because it tells us a lot. It means that these lands originally inhabited by Christians were overwhelmed by Muslims, and Muslims then had the superiority, the hegemony. And if you happen to be a Christian in a Muslim land, it didn't mean that you had the same freedom as everyone else. Your freedoms were limited unless you converted to Islam. And you had to pay a special tax. Basically, it was protection money or extortion. It's supposed protection money from forces that could harm you or affect you. The Caliph al-Hakim in the middle of the 10th century actually took the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem, this beautiful church, which was built upon the site in which Christ rose from the dead, and destroyed it. More than this, he made sure that all Jews and Christians had to wear a special yellow identification mark. So as you can see, in the Holy Land, there's a great deal of oppression that's actually taking place for those who are Christians there. And the situation became worse when Seljuk Turks coming from the steppe of Asia entered into Anatolia, modern Turkey, and the Holy Land. There they bullied pilgrims, they tore down churches, and they made an oppressive situation even worse. It is this which caused Alexius I, the Byzantine emperor, to call for help from the papacy, to seek Christian knights to come to his land of Byzantium and liberate his land and the Holy Land. So the Pope, Urban II, at the Council of Clermont in 1095, gave a call to raise an alarm that he needed Christian military might to go to the east in order to defend the pilgrims and the Christians who were there. And many people said yes to this call to liberate the Holy Land and to liberate Jerusalem. The idea of an indulgence attached to this, that a person, if they died on that journey or actually liberated the Holy Land, would be able to be free from their sins, was an especially important motivator for those crusaders who believed in God so clearly. The many legends that have grown up then are very easily explained by the fact that crusaders did not invade this land in order to enrich themselves. They actually entered there in order to liberate people. They were not involved in an offensive war. They were seeking to defend people, especially Christians, from those who were harming and hurting them. The Pope simply answered a call for help from Alexius I, the Byzantine emperor, and in so doing, thought that he was doing a great service to God. So it's very clear that each one of us should really do the best we can to battle against a dark legend like this, because in actual fact, the reality is very different from the hype.